friends, welcome back to Love Your Shelf. I'm Tracy, and today I want to talk to you about my top 10 favorite books of the year. I know the year's not over, I still have a few more books to read. I am currently reading a few things that I haven't finished this year, like books that I originally DNF'd, so I don't think any of those are going to be on my top 10. If so, my mind will be blown. So I wanted to go ahead and do two things in this video. Actually, I wanted to talk about my top 10 books of the year, and then also talk about my top 10 rated books on Goodreads. So if you go to the website, I don't know why I could not figure out how to do this on the app, so maybe it doesn't let you, but if you go to the website, you can set it up and look at all the books you read in this year and what was the highest rated books that you read. So I did go online and I did that. So I'm gonna actually go through the top 10 first. There's 5 books that are on my top 10 that were also my top 10 highest rated books of the year. So I'm going to go in order for that, 1 through 10, but then for my top 10, I'm going to go backwards, 10 through 1. So 1 through 10 on the Goodreads top, highest rated for books I've read this year are Heartstopper, number 1. So I haven't read 2, 3, or 4 yet, but I did read the first one. The second one is Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. The third one is The Storyteller by Dave Grohl. The fourth one is Remarkably Bright Creatures. And I'll put who that's by because I can't think of it off the top of my head, but Remarkably Bright Creatures is a gorgeous cover. It's blue and it has this orange octopus on it, and it is about an orange octopus who has just great satire. He's awesome. But it's also about other things, and it takes place in, I want to say, a real place in Washington, but they gave it a fake name. But I think it was definitely very inspired by a specific place in Washington, and I'm from Washington, so I was excited for that. All in all, it was a really good book. I wanted to give it 5, but I only gave it 4 because the end just wrapped up in this box, this perfect little box, and I hate that. It's kind of it doesn't happen like that in real life. If I'm not reading a fantasy book, I don't want that in my regular book. If I am reading a fantasy book, I might not want it there either, but I definitely don't want it in a non-fiction literary book about regular life. It just was too wrapped up in a tiny little nice present bow for me. But everything else about it I loved. They had really good characters, the octopus being my favorite, but they also had the main character, whose name I can't remember. It starts with a T. Tivo? I'm sure that's wrong. But she's this cute little old lady, and then this Scottish guy also who has a romantic interest in her is really fun as well. So I did enjoy most of the characters. I did not like one of the characters, but that's okay. So 4 was Remarkably Bright Creatures. 5 is House in the Cerulean Sea. 6 is Supernova, which is the 3rd book off a series by Marissa Meyer. So it's called the Renegade series. The 7th is Between the World and Me by Ta-Nehisi Coates. 8 is Atomic Habits by James Clear. 9 is Vow of Thieves, which is the 2nd book of a duology by Mary Pearson. And 10 is Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. So those are the top 10 highest rated books on my Goodreads. And 5 of those are books on my actual top 10. So my very first, actually let's start with number 10. So number 10 for me, there's actually 4 books that are all tied. I couldn't decide between them. When I got to 10, I was like, oh no, what do I do? So I have Daughter of the Moon Goddess, which is Sue Lynn Tan's debut novel that came out this year. I'm super stoked for it. I'm super stoked for the second book that she's writing that's coming out next year. And Daughter of the Moon Goddess is about a woman who's trying to help her mom escape from being imprisoned, and her mom is a moon goddess. Gifts of Imperfection by Brene Brown, which is a great book about embracing who you are and the priorities that you have and what's important to you to find your purpose in life. Aristotle and Dante Dive into the Waters of the World by Benjamin Elise Sains, which is a second book to Aristotle and Dante discover the secrets of the universe. In the second one, Aristotle like kind of comes to terms with who he is and ends up like making a lot of friends, which is in the first one, Dante is his only friend. So it's really good, especially if you read the first one and you're like ready for Aristotle to really become who he needs to be. And then Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. So those four are all tied for my number 10. So number 9 is Unbroken by Laura Hillenbrand. Unbroken is about a Olympic runner who ends up enlisting in the war as well, and the struggles that he overcomes, which is just incredible. It's a pretty hard story to read. It's very dry, but I say that it's dry because there's just so much going on, and it's very like matter-of-factly written, and it's like there's some messed up parts in it for sure. He ends up enduring like an almost 50-day trip on the ocean in a raft and survives, only to be a prisoner of war in a Japanese camp. And then he comes home and he deals with alcoholism and PTSD, and eventually like learns to forgive essentially the main person that continued to torture him while he was a prisoner of war. So it's actually a really amazing story, and I started reading it with my mom when we were on the way down to hang out with my brother for some stuff that he was going through. And I thought that I wasn't like, I literally chose it because I was told by someone else that it was the last book that they read and their mom told them to read it. And so I picked it as like one of the things that we might read, me and my mom together, when we were driving down. And that's the one that she chose. And I also picked like 8 other ones, and I was not sure that this is the one that she was going to pick, and she did. And I fell in love with it. She hasn't finished it, but I did. And it's a really great book. So that's number 9 for me. The House in the Cerulean Sea is number 8 for me by T.J. Klune, which is just an amazing book with so many good, like, remember when you're younger and they're like, what's the moral of the story? And I don't know, maybe you still do that, like read into morals of the story, but like this moral of the story is literally like, everyone can be good, don't judge a book by its cover, family is everything. Like, there's a lot of really good morals within this book, but the characters are also really good. And I did listen to this one. I listened to it. I didn't read it. And the Audible version that I got on Libby is actually like incredible. I really enjoyed the different voices that the person that narrated the book or like read the book did. And that I wouldn't say it made it for me because the book is so good, but it made it an even more enjoyable experience. Number 7 for me is Little Weirds by Jenny Slate, which is a memoir that she wrote a few years ago, but I only recently have seen it, and her cover is gorgeous. I'll put it up here. I have the book in my house somewhere, but I'm kind of like rearranging all my bookshelves right now, so I don't know where it's at, but I think I do know. But anyway, the cover is beautiful. I love Jenny Slate. I first knew her because of Parks and Rec. Recently, she's freaking hilarious in Everywhere and Everything All at Once, which was a weird movie. But she's hilarious in that as well. She's Mona Lisa in Parks and Rec, and her book is like so incredibly unique in all the best ways. Like, so I definitely would say check that out. So actually, two of these books so far on my list, or three if you count The Gifts of Imperfection as like a tie for 10, are nonfiction. So that's pretty cool. And there actually is one more nonfiction coming up on my list as well. So that's pretty awesome too. We're almost at 50-50 for that. Not really, but we can pretend like 4 out of 12 or something isn't bad. So 6 on my list actually really surprised me. So it's Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, which is a book about a guy and a girl who are really into video games and become video game partners together. And originally I thought it was a romance, but I picked it up because it has the Japanese Great Wave on it, and the cover is beautiful, and the ratings have been like off the hook. Everyone that's been reading it this year has said like a whole bunch of good things, and I really enjoy video games. My husband enjoys video games, so I thought that it would be a cool book. And it does talk a lot about the Oregon Trail because it's one of the main character's favorite books, but it also ties in a few other games, but you don't need to be a video game nerd to be into it. And it deals a lot with life, and I was so mad at the book because something happens. I don't want to give spoilers away, and I thought that the writer was being lazy and couldn't figure out a way to get out of what they wrote. Gabrielle Zevin is the writer, and I just picked up a new book from her called Elsewhere that I got at Goodwill, and I'm pretty stoked about that book now that I've read this book. So that's cool too, but I haven't read that yet. It's on my list for next year because my list for this year is still gigantic and I'm not done with it. So Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, I thought that she did something that she didn't know how to get out of, so she just did something like crazy climactic, but turns out it's kind of like a third main character and what the book is based off of, and it made me love it even more. Like at first I was really angry about it, but now that I finished reading it, I was like, oh shit, that's really good. And I think about it a lot because it's so well written, and oh my gosh. So it talks about like amputee stuff, and like thinking that your leg or arm is still there, and things that people think about in that. And it talks about video games, of course, and it talks about friendship. There's just a lot going on, and a lot of the things that she writes has really great stuff in it. Like, it's relatable, or things that you've never thought you had to relate to, you get to gain new insight about, so that was really good. There is also like a pretty shit relationship in it that has like sexual abuse, so there is that. Trigger warning if you need it, but I don't know, I wasn't bothered by it, but that doesn't mean other people aren't. So and that also brings into like how you can be going through your own things and not realize how bad they really are, and so neither do your friends. Because they're all friends during a bunch of stuff, and they never really talk about it or bring up these things. So there's also that. Anyway, it's a really great book, and I would recommend that to anyone as well. The fifth, my number 5 book is actually a duology that I have here, which is Dance of Thieves and Vow of Thieves by Mary Pearson. So I read Vow of Thieves this year. I read Dance of Thieves this year also, I think, at the beginning of the year in January. And then this didn't come out till like May or June, and I was devastated because I didn't know. But I read that too. And both of them are very good. And it's about Jace and Kazi and their like enemies to lovers trope in a fantasy world. And it's really good. So I definitely recommend that as well. It is almost 1,000 or just barely over 1,000 pages altogether, but it's actually like a really easy, fast read because there's so much going on, a lot of action that you want to get through quickly. So that's really good as well. The fourth book is The Firekeeper's Daughter by Angeline Bowley. And this is one of the first books I read. I actually read it for book club, and I was shocked that I loved it so much because I went into it not knowing what it was about. And then it ends up being about kind of like meth and murders, and not what I expected it to be about at all for like a Native American story, but these are things that are like kind of hurting Native American culture now. So it's very modern. It's about now, like times today, and things people are going through within their culture. And you also get to learn a lot about her specific Native American culture. And it was a huge plot twist. It kept me interested the whole time. It was a really good book. So that's number 4. Number 3 on my list is, so these next 3 are all these next 3 were all on the Goodreads top 10 as well, but they're also on my top 10. So number 3 for me was Between the World and Me by Ta-Nehisi Coates, which I don't have, like, I can't describe how good it is. You just need to go read it because Ta-Nehisi Coates utilizes every word so meticulously in the best way to describe. It's an open letter to his son and what he needs to overcome as a black man in America and still keep himself safe and like not let fear drive his life. And it is incredibly powerful and so sad and amazing. So that is number 3 for me. Nonfiction book, actually. So that's 5 out of 12, 13-ish, because I have more than 10 because of my tie. So yeah, 5 nonfiction. Okay, so number 2, also nonfiction, The Storyteller by Dave Grohl, which he says in the book he just did like 4 interviews and then a ghostwriter wrote his stories, but his stories are amazing. Like, first of all, they're kick-ass. Like, it's very Dave Grohl. There's a lot of cussing in it, but there's so much gratitude, and he talks about like his belief in aliens, and he talks about hanging out with Kurt Cobain, and he talks about losing his best friend and Kurt Cobain, and he talks about really cool things he's gotten to do with his mom and his daughter, and how he became who he is, and like hanging out with Paul McCartney and getting arrested on a scooter in Australia. So there's a lot of like really fun stories, and I laughed and I cried, and it's an incredible book. And then my number 1 book of the year maybe is kind of cheating as well, but it is the Renegade trilogy by Marissa Meyer, who I read. So this is the first thing by Marissa Meyer I've ever read, and I read these books because my brother said he was going to read them, and he did. But I read all of them in like very quickly. So altogether there's like 1,500 pages in here. It starts with Renegades and then goes to Arch Enemies and then Supernova. So Supernova was in there. I don't know why Renegades and Arch Enemies weren't. This series is incredible, and if you follow me or have listened to my videos before, you've probably heard me talking about them because I know I've mentioned it a few times this year because they're amazing. But it's about a woman named Nova, who has superpowers, and she is trying to essentially help her uncle take down the people in power, who also have superhero powers. But everyone's superhero powers are very unique, or at least I think that they're unique. Like, there's a chick that turns into butterflies, and there is a person that turns into like smoke, essentially. And then there's like regular stuff, like someone can fly or has super strength. And so she penetrates the like superpower group that's in charge of everything, and has a romance with someone, and there's some political aspects of it. So this is my number one that I recommend, and those are my top 10 with the top 10 that Goodreads has. So top 10 rated with Goodreads that were on my top 10 is Vow of Thieves, House in the Cerulean Sea, Supernova, The Storyteller, and Between the World and Me. So yeah, if you liked this video, please like and subscribe. My name is Tracy. This is Love Your Shelf. Thanks for talking about my top 10 favorite books and the top 10 rated Goodread books that I read this year. Have a great day. Namaste.